is starting. Hello everyone, my name is Violet Sia from EDB APJ Marketing. I will be your host today, and I'm joined by Ashutosh Sharma, Principal Software Engineer from EDB. Thank you for joining us. Ashutosh will be speaking on auditing and monitoring Postgres SQL and EPAS. Before we get started, I want to let you know that this session is being recorded and all your lines are muted. If you have a question, please submit it in the question box, which you will find at the bottom of your screen. Please note that all questions will only be answered at the end of Ashutosh's presentation. Also, we ask for your patience and understanding since both Ashutosh and I are working from home, and we sincerely hope that there will not be any connectivity issues. Okay, before we get started, yeah, so we'll just wait maybe just one more minute for people to settle in. I can see people just signing in, and so with that, I will pass the mic, so to speak, over to you, Ashutosh. Over to you, Ashutosh.
Yeah, thanks, Violet, for introducing me. And thank you all for joining this webinar. So as you all already know, this webinar is about the auditing and monitoring EDP Advanced Server Database. And it is going to be helpful for those who are interested in monitoring their database for security reasons, as in to understand if there is any security breach happening in the database, or trying to understand the performance of the database, or trying to figure out if there is any bloat in the database. So yeah, let's start with the talk then. So yeah, let me first quickly go through the agenda of this talk. So basically in this talk, I'll be discussing on three main topics. Firstly, I'll be talking on the auditing feature in EDB Advanced Server. And that will be followed by the introduction to stats collector process and some of the catalog views. I'll then be explaining about the PG stat statements and its use cases. And later I'll be talking about this EDB specific package named DBMS_profiler. And lastly, I'll be talking on some of the useful debugging tools like page inspect and PG stat tuple. And then I'll be, we'll be doing the question answer session. So yeah. So let me start with the first topic then. So the first topic is basically about auditing. So what is database auditing and why is it needed? Database auditing is basically a process of observing or monitoring the database activities so as to be aware of the various actions taken by database users. In short, it is a database facility that provides answers to different questions, like who viewed and modified the sensitive data in the system, at what date and time was the data modified or viewed, which program or client application was used to view the data, and if the data got changed, then at what was the old and the new version of data. So to get the answer to these sort of questions, we can make use of database auditing. And other than this, there are different other requirements. There are different other necessities for which the database auditing can be used. For example, database auditing can be used to prevent database users from taking any inappropriate actions. Because the users are aware of the fact that they would be very easily caught if they do any inappropriate activity, right? So they are all aware of the fact that with the help of database auditing facility, one can very easily find the identity of a person trying to do any bad activity. So that way, database auditing can help in preventing database users from taking any bad actions. Apart from that, database auditing can also be used to investigate any suspicious activity. So this database auditing feature can help investigators, to find out any suspicious activity, as in access to the database during non-business hour, or unexpected changes in the user permissions, or unexpected change in data content growth, and things like that. Similarly, this database auditing can also be used to identify abuse of access rights. I mean, there are many a times, when users are granted more permissions than actually they need to do their job, right? For example, let's say if there is a user A, then and he's a granted permission of read write when he is just supposed to be given the read permission. So he can make use of the write permission to do bad things, right? So in that case, to identify such bad actions, he can make use of this database auditing feature, right? Now, what is EDB audit logging feature? So EDB audit logging is basically a feature in EDB Advanced Server that allows auditors, database administrators, or security administrators to track and analyze the database activities. Basically, it generates the set of audit files, which contains all the relevant information required to track and analyze the database activities. And these audit logs basically contains the information about the date and time when the database user established the connection to the advanced server. It contains the information about the number of failed authentication attempts, and it also contains the information about the database objects that a user created, modified, or viewed when connected to the EDB advanced server. Now, how to use EDB audit logging feature? So by default, auditing is disabled in EDB advanced server. And if we want to use it, we must first enable it. And for that, we have a configuration parameter called EDB_audit, which is initially set to some value called none, which basically means that the EDB audit logging is currently disabled. And if we want to enable it, in that case, we can set it to two values, either CSV or XML. So if we set this parameter to the CSV value, it will enable auditing and will write audit records to the CSV file. Similarly, if we set it to XML, it will again enable auditing, but this time it will write the audit records to an XML file, right? Now, once auditing is enabled, we must think about where to store the audit files. And for this, we have another configuration parameter called EDB audit directory, which can be used to do so, right? So by default, this configuration parameter is set to somewhere in data directory, which means all the audit log files will be generated inside the data directory, right? But the problem there is, like, when you create audit directory inside data directory, it will unnecessarily increase the size of data directory, because every now and then the audit files are generated. So when the base backup and all is taken, it will unnecessarily increase the size of the base backup. So to avoid that, we can make use of this configuration parameter to set the audit directory somewhere outside the data directory. But again, if we want to do that, we want to ensure that it is set to some location where only the privileged user can have access to. And so now, when we have enabled this auditing facility, and when we have decided like where to store the audit files, the next step would be to decide what exactly we want to audit. So for this, we have another set of configuration parameter which tells us about which information can be logged into the audit file, right? What information needs to be audited. For example, the first thing is EDB audit connect. So this basically enables auditing of all connections to the instance, right? So this can be set to three different values. It can be set to successful, meaning that, in that case, it will only log the successful connections, right? And if it is set to fail, in that case, only the failed connection attempts will be logged. And if it is set to all, both the successful and failed connection attempts will be logged. Now, another parameter is EDB audit disconnect, which is just an opposite of EDB audit connect, as in it will just log the disconnection informations. And the third parameter is EDB audit statements, which basically enables auditing of different categories of SQL statement, such as insert, update, delete, truncate, etc. So whichever SQL statement you specify with this parameter, that statement will get logged into the audit file. And the fourth one is EDB audit tag, which basically allows user to specify a string value, and that string value will get associated with every record being added into the audit file. Now here is a demo which basically shows how this EDB audit logging feature can be used. So the first thing that we need to do here is to enable auditing and set the directory where the audit files will be generated. So for this, I have used this configuration parameters in step 1, which is basically EDB_audit and EDB_audit_directory. But again, like as I said previously, when we set audit directory location, we need to be sure that the location that we set is the location where only the privileged user can have access to, not the normal users. Now in step 2, we need to basically decide like what information we actually want to audit. So for this, I have set the relevant configuration parameter. Right, and the third step, I'm trying to perform changes in the database. So the first thing I have done is I have created an admin user. I'm trying to connect to the admin user. Now this admin user is basically trying to create a table, perform some insert operation to that table, and then it is like he's trying to connect to some local user. This local user is basically trying to perform some delete and update operation on the accounts table created by the admin user. So once all these changes are done in the database, now let's see in the step 4 what information actually got captured into the audit file. So we can see here in the audit file, the first record is about basically the create user statement. So you can see here the admin user was created, and that statement got logged into the audit file. Now after this, the another statement that got logged into the audit file is basically about the connection request. So you can see here that in the step 3, the second thing that we did was we tried connected to the admin user, and then admin user basically created accounts table. He tried inserting some data into it. So both those statements got logged into the audit file. And after that, we connected to the local user, and this local user has basically tried to perform delete and update operation on the accounts table. So we have one entry for each of these operations as well. So I mean, likewise, we can see an entry in the audit file for all the actions taken by the database users. So this is how we can use EDB audit logging feature. Moving to the next slide now. So what is object level auditing? So object level auditing is basically a new capability added to the EDB audit logging feature that allows users to perform auditing at object level, right? So to use this feature, we can add all the objects to be audited in a group and enable auditing for that group. And currently, this feature is can only be used for tables. So here is a demo that shows how to use this feature. So in step 1, I have created basically some of the tables, as in table T11, T12, T21, and T22, right? And then the next step, I'm trying to add these tables to different groups. So I have added table T11 and table T12 to group 1. So for this, I have tried to, there is a rel option, called EDB underscore audit underscore group, which can be specified with the alter table command. And using this rel option, we can specify which table can be added to what group. So here in this case, I have added table T11 and table T12 to group 1, and then the next tables, table T21 and table T22 to group 2. And in the step 3, I'm trying to enable auditing for a group, right? So for this, I have used the configuration parameter EDB audit statement, wherein I have specified that I need to enable auditing, select and insert operations on group 1. So, right, so whenever a select and insert operation is performed on the tables which belong to group 1, auditing will be done for that, right? And then I'm just trying to reload the conf file because I have done the changes to some of the configuration parameters here. And in the step 4, what I'm trying to do is I'm trying to perform some changes in the objects created in step 1, right? So I have tried to perform insert into table T11 and table 211, table 21. And then I'm trying to perform select on table T11. And then I have tried to perform update on table T11, and that is followed by delete on table T11. So if I see the information captured in the audit file, I can see that the insert operation on table T11 got captured, as well as the select operation on table T11 got captured. Other operations, other SQL statements were just omitted from the audit file, right? Because if you see the configuration parameter that we have set here in step 3, which says that only the select and insert operation on the tables which belongs to group 1 should be audited, right? So you can see here that table T11 insert operation on table T11 got captured, which is fine. Insert operation on table T12 was omitted because it doesn't belong to group 1. Now select operation on table T11 got captured because it belongs to table T11, to group 1. And update and delete operation, though they are performed in table T11, which belongs to group 1, it got omitted because we haven't enabled auditing for the update and delete operation on either of the group, right? So this is how this object level auditing feature in EDB can be used. Now, how to filter audit logs using error codes. So in EDB Advanced Server, we have an extension named EDB underscore filter underscore log that can be used to filter a user-specified error codes from audit files. To filter audit log entries, we must first load the extension by adding the following value to shared preload libraries parameter in postgresql.conf, right? So in postgres.conf file, we have this shared preload libraries option to which we can specify the extension that we want to load. So in this case, EDB filter log, for EDB filter log, if we want to use this extension, we'll have to specify it with this library. And then, in this particular extension, we have something called error code, which can be set to the error code that we want to omit from the log file. And then here is a demo that shows, how to use this particular extension. So in step one, I have created a test table, which contains a single column, and there is a primary key on that column. And then I'm trying to insert some data into this table. In step two, I have set basically the error code which I want to omit from the log file. So I have set the error code to 23505, and this 23505 basically corresponds to the error for unique key constraint violation, right? In the step three, I'm trying to insert some value into the test table, right? So that the error 23505 gets generated. So I'm trying to insert the same value 1 into table T1, which is already present there. And since I'm trying to insert the duplicate value, it will generate the unique key constraint violation error. And then I'm trying to insert another value called null, which should generate another error for the not null constraint violation. But then let's see, what are the entries that got added into the audit file. So you can see here that there is one entry. The first entry is for the first value that was inserted into the table T1. That is the first insert statement, right? And then there is another statement, which is basically throwing an error, right? Because we try to insert the value null into the table T1, right? And since we are trying to insert null into the primary key column, it is resulting into the not null constraint violation error, right? So there is no entry for the unique constraint violation error, because the second statement that we tried to run on table T1 was the insert statement, which was trying to insert a duplicate value into the table. But since we have set the error code to 23505, which belongs to the unique key constraint violation error, this particular error got omitted from the audit log file, right? So as expected, we can see an entry in the audit file for the null constraint violation, but there is no entry for the unique constraint violation. And this is how this particular extension can be used. Now, the next thing is how to redact password in audit logs. So EDB filter log extension in EDB advanced server has the capability to hide passwords specified with create or alter user command, right? So one can use EDB filter log .redact password commands option to instruct the server to redact stored passwords from the log file. So basically, this particular option recognizes the command, either create user or alter user command, right? So this particular syntax is what this redact password feature can read basically. So whenever there is a password specified either with create user command or with alter user command, that password can be redacted with the help of this particular option. So here is a short demo that shows how to use this, how to redact password in audit logs. So in step one, I have enabled password redaction. So for that, I have set this particular option to true, redact password command option. And then in step two, I'm trying to create user or change the password for an existing user, right? So I have created a user U1, and then I have specified the password for this user. And the second statement, I'm trying to alter the password for user U1, right? So when I alter the password for user U1, I have to specify both the old and the new passwords. And then if I see the information captured in the audit file, I can see here that with the create user statement that got audited here, you can see here the password that was specified by the user got replaced with X. Similarly, when the alter user command was ran, right, both the old and the new password got replaced with the option X, right? So both the password in both the cases got redacted. And this is how this feature can be used. So this was all about auditing feature in EDB Advanced Server. Now I'm just moving to the next topic, which is on monitoring post CRA-SQL, right? So here we need to first understand what is statistics collected process. So basically in Postgres, we have an optional process called stats collected process, which is on by default, right? So basically what this process does is like it collects the statistics from all the running processes and stores those stats into some stats file, which is stored in pg underscore stat underscore tmp location, right? Now there are a lot of catalog views developed, written inside Postgres, which basically gets the stats from this statistics file and shows them to the user. And the behavior of this stats collector process is basically dependent on the set of track parameter, which tells the stats collector about which metrics it needs to collect from the running processes. Right, so here are the different track parameters associated with this stats collector process. The first one is track activities, which basically enables monitoring of the current command being executed by any backend process. So if you want to track the statistics about the SQL queries being executed by any backend process in Postgres, you need to turn on this particular parameter, and this is on by default. Another parameter is track activity query size, which basically decides the size of the query that will be stored by the stats collector process, right? So by default, the size is 1024 bytes, meaning that if there is any query which is exceeding this limit, that query will be truncated and stored into the stats file. Now, another parameter is track counts, which basically allows the stats collector process to collect all the base table and index table access related statistics and store them into pgstat underscore tmp location in form of this db underscore database oid.stat or globals.stat. And again, this parameter is on by default. Other than this, we have a track IO timing parameter, which basically enables monitoring of disk block read and write time. That is the time spent on disk blocks read or write operation by each backend process. And by default, this parameter is set to off because it results into a lot of performance and all. I mean, it impacts the overall query performance. And the last parameter associated with the stats collector process is basically track functions, which basically says whether the PLPG SQL C or other type of SQL functions should be, the statistics related to the SQL functions needs to be tracked or not. So just moving to the next slide now, which is basically about statistics views. So statistics views, also known as catalog views, are the set of predefined views used to view the database statistics and various activities performed by the database server at the runtime, right? So it basically, it uses the data collected by the collector process, by the stats collector process, to report various database activities at runtime, right? And there are several statistics views available in PostgreSQL. So in this presentation, we'll just talk about some of them, which basically includes pgstat database, pgstat all tables, and pgstat activity, right? So let's start with pgstat database first. So this pgstat database catalog view basically shows statistics about each database in the system, right? So it contains one row for each database showing the database wide statistics. And it shows the information such as the number of backend processes connected to a database, the number of transactions committed or rollback in a particular database, number of data blocks read from the disk, or the total time spent in disk read and write activities, right? And this is a big view, right? So if you want to see the layout of this catalog view, you can refer to the URL which has been mentioned here. So now let's talk about some of the use cases of pgstat database view. So the first use case is getting statistics like the cache hit ratio, DML statistics, transaction statistics, etc. for a particular database. As an example, here is a query that I have written, which basically is trying to perform select, which is basically trying to query pgstat database view to see the statistics for each database in the system, right? But it doesn't checks the statistics of the databases like template 0 and 1, which are basically not used by the user normally, right? So here in my case, like I have two databases, EDB and Postgres, and you can see the statistics that it is showing for each of this database, like what was the cache hit ratio, what are the number of transactions that got committed in each of this database, what are the number of transactions that got rolled back, what are the number of tuples fetched from the disk, and all that. So another use case of pgstat database could be to find the total number of temp files generated in the database, right? So we can query pgstat database view to get the number of temp files generated. And if this number is big, we can know that we probably need to increase the size of walk name and do that as and when required. Another use case could be to monitor the overall database loads, right? So we can query this pgstat database view to see like which database in the system is heavily loaded, and try to find out the solution for it so that it doesn't impact the overall database performance. So here, like I have written a query which basically tries to run select on pgstat database, and then it is trying to see the number of backends, the number of transactions running in each of the database. So I'm just moving to the next statistics view now, which is basically pgstat all tables. So this pgstat all tables view basically contains one row for each table in the current database, right? So this view basically shows information about the system table as well as the user table as well as the toast table in the current database, right? So we have other couple of catalog views called pgstat user tables and pgstat sys tables, but they only contain information about the user table and the system table. This pgstat all table is the combination of both of these views. And again, this the layout of this view is very big. I couldn't include here in the slide. So for this, I have just included the URL here. You may refer to this URL to get the detail, to see the detailed layout of this particular view. Now, let's see some of the use cases of pgstat all tables. So one of the use case of pgstat all tables could be to find the top 10 most read tables in the database, right? So here is basically a query that runs select on pgstat all table to see which table in the database is most actively read, right? So you can see here in the list, pg class is the one that is read most number of times, and that is followed by some of the other system tables. So we can generate queries like this to find to get the answers to this sort of questions. Similarly, pgstat all tables can also be used to do auto vacuum monitoring, like just trying to find out basically which table in a database requires kind of like vacuuming, right? So we can just query this pgstat all table to see when this particular table in the database was last vacuumed, and does it really require to be vacuumed or not. And this basically eventually helps in improving the overall performance in the database, right? Similarly, we can use this pgstat all tables to identify the dead tuples count in the table and the number of live tuples, when was the table last analyzed, and all that. Other than this, pgstat all tables view can also be used to find the ratio of index scan to sequential scan on a table, right? So for this, again, we can develop a query like shown here and try to find out the ratio of index scan to sequential scan on the table, right? So now just moving to the next view, the next catalog view, which is basically pgstat activity. So this pgstat activity view basically shows what activity is currently happening on your PostgreSQL database server. So it contains one row per server process and shows some very useful information like the current state of running backend process, the query that the client process is currently running, query start time, or transaction start time, the wait event on which client is currently waiting, and so on, right? So in short, pgstat activity basically provides a way to get a snapshot of what every client on the server is currently doing, right? And just moving to the next slide now, which basically talks about the use cases of pgstat activity. So one of the use case of pgstat activity could be to find out the number of connections to your database. As an example, now here, I'm just trying to query this particular view to identify what are the number of open sessions in the current database. So in EDB database, I can see here there are 2 open connections. Out of the 2 open connections, one is in idle state, another one is in the active state, right? So to get this sort of information, we can query this view and we can get the information very easily. Now, another use case of pgstat activity could be to find and kill the long-running idle database connections. Now, there are many times we have seen that there is some connections which is in the idle state for a very, very long time, right? So I've written just a small query which queries this pgstat activity catalog view to find out the sessions which is in the idle state for more than 5 days or for more than 10 days, right? And so we just need to identify such queries, and if not required, we just need to identify such long-running idle connection sessions and just kill them if they are not required. And another use case for pgstat activity could be to detect long-running queries or transactions. So again, we can query this pgstat activity view to find all the long running queries and transactions. We can basically see like why the query is taking very long time, to process. I mean, is it waiting on, is it waiting somewhere for something to get this? I mean, that kind of information, again, we can make use of this catalog view. So other use cases of pgstat activity could be to do the wait event monitoring for a long running queries, right? So we have a couple of columns in pgstat activity called wait event type and wait event, so we can make use of the information stored in this two columns to see, which query is waiting on what particular thing and why is it waiting really, right? Similarly, to find the block sessions, the information about the block sessions, again, we can make use of this pgstat activity catalog view. Yeah, so moving to the next slide, which is basically on pgstat statements, right? So pgstat statements is basically an extension module that tracks the execution statistics of all SQL statements executed by a server and stores them into pgstat statements table, which is basically a hash table, right? So it's a module that needs to be loaded and is not available in the default configuration. It can be loaded by adding pgstat statements to share preload libraries in postgresql.conf file. So whenever any SQL query is executed by a server, this pgstat statements adds an entry for that SQL query into the hash table where all the statistics about the query executions are stored, right? And when user queries pgstat statistics view, it fetches the stats from the hash table and shows it to the user. Now, there are certain track parameters associated with this extension. So let's see them one by one. So the first one is basically pgstat statements.max, which basically tells what is the maximum number of statements tracked by pgstat statements module, right? So in other words, we can say that this basically decides what is the maximum number of rows that a pgstat statements can hold, right? Another parameter associated with this extension is pgstat statements.track, which basically specifies the statements that can be tracked by pgstat statements module, right? So it can be either the top level statement or all the statements, including the nested statements or none. The third parameter is pgstat statements.track utility, which basically tells whether the pgstat statements should be tracking the utility statements or not. Another thing is very important parameter called pgstat statements.save, which basically specifies whether to save statements statistics across the server shutdown, meaning that when the server is shut down, right, at that time, should pgstat statements save all the information stored into the disk or not, right? So by default, this value is on, meaning that whenever the server shutdown will happen, at that time, all the information stored into the in-memory hash table will be flushed into the disk file. And whenever the server is restarted, the information will be read from the disk file and will be loaded back into the in-memory hash table. So here is, now let's talk about some of the use cases of pgstat statements table. So one of the use case could be to find the statistics of the queries tracked by pgstat statements, right? So here is a small query that I have written, which basically uses pgstat statements to see what are the queries that got executed more than 3 times, right? And it is trying to see the stats about those queries. So here, as an example, the query insert into table T1 values got executed 7 number of times, right? And this pgstat statements table basically this stores the queries in normalized form. As in this case, if you see the query that it has stored, basically it has replaced the values with $1, right? So that way, for multiple insert statements that is performed on this table T1, it can be represented as a single statement, as well as the values that user specifies with the insert statement that will basically be kept secret, right? So you can see here that this insert statement basically got executed 7 times, and the total execution time for this query, I mean, for all the 7 insert statements is this much of milliseconds, right? And the minimum execution time, basically out of the 7 insert statement that was performed on table T1, this is the minimum time that this is the time that one of the insert statement took. So this is the minimum time taken by the insert statement, and the maximum time taken is basically this 2.9 milliseconds, whatever. And then we can see the information about the number of blocks that was already present in the cache, and it didn't have to read from the disk, and the number of blocks it read from the disk. So the number of blocks present in the cache was 6. The number of blocks it had to read from the disk was 2. So if we want to get the statistics at the query level, we can make use of pgstat statements like this. Now, another use case of pgstat statements could be to monitor the query performance, right? So what I have done here is basically I have run the pgbench script, right? And then executed this pgstat statements to see, while pgbench script was running, which command in pgbench script took most of the time. So you can see here, like I have sorted it basically based on the total time taken by each of these queries. So you can see here that the copy command, which was executed on pgbench_accounts table, took most of the time, right? And it was just called once, right? And other information like, what was the CPU percentage that was taken by this particular query, what were the number of blocks read from the disk, and what were the number of blocks already available in the cache, and those sort of information can also be seen here. Now, another statement that took most time and is second in the list is basically the select statement, right? Yes. So, but we also need to see like what was the number of times the select statement got executed. So this got executed around 3 lakhs number of times. So if you see the overall time taken by a single select statement is just like the mean value is just 0.16, which is very less, but just that it got executed more number of times. So if we can see the total time it took, which is the addition of all the execution, it comes out to be this, this 55293.41 milliseconds, which comes out to be second in the list. And then there are other statements likewise, for example, alter table statement, vacuum statement on the same pgbench account table. So we can see here they just got executed once, and the total time taken by them is again huge. So this was all about pgstat statements. In EDB, we have we also have something called EDB wait states, which functions like pgstat activity, which can be used to monitor the wait events and all. I couldn't include it here in this presentation because of time limit and all. Now, another thing that I would like to discuss here is basically the dbms_profiler package, which is available in EDB Advanced Server. So this dbms_profiler package provides a set of functions to collect performance statistics about the SPL and PL/PG/SQL statements. So basically, it gathers the performance information of each line inside the SPL or PL/PG/SQL blocks and store them into the statistics table named PL/SQL_profiler_raw data. So here are the different objects created by this particular package. So these are the set of functions that it creates, like start profiler, stop profiler, pause profiler, resume profiler, and flush data. So using these functions, we can do the profiling of a particular session, right? And similarly, it also creates 2 or 3 tables like PL/SQL profiler runs, units, and raw data, where all the information about all the profiling are stored. So here's a short demo that shows how this particular package can be used. So in step 1, I have created SPL objects to profile. So I have created a table T1 with single column aint, right? And then I have created a couple of functions named SPL func insert and SPL func update, which basically tries to perform the insert and update operation on table T1. In step 2, I'm trying to do the profiling. So with the help of start profiler function available with this dbms_profiler package, I'm starting the profiling. And then inside this profiling session, I'm trying to run the two functions that I created in step 1, SPL func insert and SPL func update, and then have stop profiling, right? So as soon as we stop profiling, the statistics collected in this profiling sessions are all flushed into a table named PL/SQL_profiler_raw data, right? And the step 3, I'm just trying to query the tables created by this profiler package, dbms_profiler package, to see what are the information that got saved. So you can see here, like in the first, I have tried to query PL/SQL_profiler_runs, which basically stores the information about each run, about each profiling session. So here, the profiling session is just single. And in the single profiling session, which which is named as SPL underscore func, I have executed two SPL functions, SPL func insert and SPL func update, right? So you can see here the overall statistics of this profiling session, which is the run ID associated with this session is 1. This session was named as SPL underscore func, and the total time it took to execute this profiling session, right, is like this much of milliseconds, right? So you can see here that this is the time, taken by this profiling session, so this time includes the time taken by for the execution of SPL func insert as well as SPL func update. Now, like in this slide, basically, I'm trying to query PL SQL profiler underscore raw data table. So this PL SQL profiler underscore raw data table basically stores the information about the execution of each line in the SPL function or procedure, right? So here you can see that, I can see the source code. I can, fetch data stored in the source code column, and then I can see the total execution time and the number of times that they were executed. So you can see here, like this basically table contains the information about each statement of the function that got executed in step 2 here, right? So if you just add the total time taken by each statement, it should be equivalent to this run total time. So this is how, this particular DBMS underscore profiler package can be used to see, to profile the SPL or PL/PG SQL functions, procedures, or triggers. So moving to the next slide now, the next topic is basically about debugging tools, right? So as mentioned earlier, I'll be talking about two main debugging tools here. One is Page Inspect and the second one is pgstat. So let's start with Page Inspect. So Page Inspect is basically an extension in Postgres that provides functions to inspect the contents of database pages at low level, which can be used for debugging purpose. So it basically, includes various user exposed functions that can be used to view the content of heap and different index pages. And it is particularly useful in understanding the changes happening at page level when various actions are performed on a relation. So one of the use case of this Page Inspect table is to inspect heap and index pages. So let's see how we can inspect heap and index pages using this particular extension. So here I have first created a table tab 1, which basically has a single column with primary key on it. And then I'm trying to perform some insert operation on table tab 1. And then I have just created the extension Page Inspect. And as soon as you create the Page Inspect extension, it creates, it internally creates number of, functions which can be queried to view or to see the contents of at the page level, right? So one of those functions is heap page underscore items. So this heap page items, using this function, I'm trying to see what are the contents available in page 0 of table tab 1, right? So you can see here I have first queried get raw page, to get this block 0 of table tab 1, and that block I'm passing to this heap page item functions, which will show me the information, the contents available in that page, right? So you can see here that in page 0 of table tab 1, since we inserted one tuple, right, insert into tab 1 value 10. So you can see here that there is one entry available in page 0 of table tab 1, and the offset at which the value 10 got inserted is 8160, and the length of the value is basically 28 bytes. And also the transaction related information can be seen here, like the xmin, xmax, and other things. Now in the next step, what I have done is, like, I have performed update on table tab 1, right? So as soon as I perform update and then try to see the contents of page 0 of table tab 1, I can see here, like, I have two entries present here, right? So the first entry, which basically points to the first tuple, you can see the offset is 8160, which is same as the previous one, right? So there is an xmax value associated with it, which means this tuple has been deleted, right? And the new tuple basically, which is at offset 8128, right, has no xmax associated with it, and it is basically of the same size, 28 bytes, right? Now, next, what I'm trying to do is, like, since I have a primary key column associated with table tab 1, there is an index present here, right? So I'm just trying to query, I'm just trying to see the contents available in the first block of index table tab 1 underscore pk. And for that, I have another function called BT underscore page underscore items, which is provided by this page inspect module. So I can see here, like there are 2 index entries available in block 1 of the index table, right? So the one index entry points to the first, the old tuple, another points to the second one. And now in the next step, I have just tried to perform vacuum on table tab 1. So once I do vacuum, and then if I query heap page items, I can see here that the first items was basically cleaned, right? So I can see here that the second tuple, which was initially present at this offset 8128, has now been moved to the offset of the first tuple, which was the old tuple. And the space which was occupied by the second tuple has now been cleaned so that it can be reused by some other tuples. Right, so this is how we can make use of page inspect module to see the contents at page level in the table. Now the another debugging tool that I would like to discuss here is basically pgstat-tuple. So this is another extension module available in Postgres that provides table level statistics, right? So this contrib module is particularly useful in identifying the tables which have bloated, which are basically bloated, and how much bloat is there. So if we want to get the information of that kind, of that sort, we can make use of this extension module. And like page inspect, this module also provides a set of functions that can be used to identify the bloated tables in Postgres. Now let's see how to identify bloated tables using this particular contrib module. So what I have done here is like I have run the pgbench script at the scale factor of 10. And once I do that, I have started a couple of sessions. In session 1, what I'm trying to do is, first I'm just trying to see what is the size of pgbench underscore accounts table. So this pgbench underscore accounts table gets created by the pgbench script. Now let's see what is the size of it. So if we just run /dt, you can see here that the size of this table is initially 128 MB, right? And now I have started a couple of sessions here. In first session, I'm just trying to begin a transaction with the isolation level of repeatable read. And then I'm trying to perform some query on the pgbench underscore accounts table. In second session, I'm trying to run the pgbench script, which is basically trying to perform read-write operation on this pgbench underscore accounts table. Right. So once this pgbench read-write operation is done on pgbench underscore accounts table, now in session 1, if we see the size of pgbench underscore accounts table, you can see here that the size is basically 256 MB. Which basically just got doubled. Initially, it was 128 MB, and then now it is 256 MB. Now, in session 1, what I'm trying to do here is I'm basically trying to perform vacuum analyze on pgbench underscore accounts table, right? And then I have created this extension pgstat-tuple, and I'm trying to query this pgstat-tuple underscore approx function, for this particular pgbench underscore accounts table. So if I run this function on pgbench underscore accounts table, I can see here that the approx free percentage, that is the free space available on this table, is almost 50%. So which means this tuple, this particular table, pgbench underscore accounts, has been bloated. And this is how maybe you can make use of this particular contrib model to identify the bloated table, right? So this is all about the debugging tools. There are other debugging tools as well, like pg underscore buffer underscore cache, which would be very useful for this debugging purpose, but somehow due to time limit and all, I cannot include it here. So yeah, that's it. And here are basically the references to different topics that we have discussed here: auditing, monitoring, as well as the debugging tools that we got chance to discuss. And then the next slide is about EDB. So which basically talks like about the EDB as a Postgres company. We all know that EDB is basically one of the most one of the biggest PostgreSQL company at present. It has recently acquired a second quadrant company. So overall, it becomes if you see the number of experts available in Postgres, now EDB is the company where you will find most of them, right? So yeah. So yeah, so it's the time for Q&A. Please let me know if you have any questions.
Thank you, Ashutosh. It's really a very informative session. So without further ado, I want to bring up some of the questions asked. There are actually lots of questions asked. I think one common one that has been asked by a few persons is that are these auditing and monitoring features that you just described, are they only available in EDB Postgres, meaning EPAS, or is it also available in the community version?
So auditing feature that I have discussed here is something specific to EDB Advanced Server and is only available with EDB. And the monitoring thing that I have discussed here, like the stats collector process, the catalog views, right? So those are all Postgres specific and they are available with open source, right? So those things will be available both ways. And the another thing that I discussed in monitoring topic was DBMS underscore profiler, which is basically used to profile the SPL or PLPG SQL functions, triggers, and procedures. So those that is something specific to EDB and is only available with EDB. So that's it.
Thank you, Ashutosh. Okay, there are so many questions. Okay, I will just start from the top, right? So this person asks, can you monitor audit DBA activities? I repeat,
Sorry, you said
I
yes.
repeat, can you monitor or audit DBA activities?
Yeah, so the tools that we have discussed here, like the auditing tool as well as the monitoring tool, like those are mostly used by DBA. So yes, I mean DBA can use these tools for I mean monitoring database purpose.
Okay, thank you. So someone also asked, from which version of EDBAS is auditing feature available?
Auditing feature is available. I'm not sure about. But it's quite an old feature in EDB Advanced Server. So I think it should be available right from 9.6 onwards, I guess. Maybe before that as well. But having said that, there are a couple of features which I have discussed here. I mean password redaction related thing or object level auditing related things. So those things are added recently in EDBS. So maybe those features will only be available with the latest versions of EDBs.
Uh, Thank you, Ashutosh. Okay, another question that I think is interesting and good for the audience, wider audience to know. Someone also asked, like, how this auditing feature of Postgres SQL differs from other DBMS vendors like Oracle and IBM DB.
I'm not sure about how like what is like how the auditing feature in other databases, other RDBMS works, and what it does, like what are the facilities available with this particular feature in other RDBMS. Uh, but uh, uh, but but I'm sure that the overall motive or the intention for writing this feature in all the RDBMS would be same. There might be some plus and minus, but the intention remains the same, as in we want to achieve the same thing with this feature. And I think the things that can be achieved I mean in other RDBMS with this auditing feature, I'm sure those things can be achieved in EDB Advanced Server as well with this particular feature. So
Yeah, thank you. So yeah, we have about 5 minutes more. So another question is, how would auditing impact performance in a busy OLTP environment in case we audit all DML and DDL across the board? So I think basically is how would auditing impact performance in a busy OLTP environment?
I don't think there would be much impact on the performance of the query as far as auditing is concerned. Like I mean, it's not like it records the timing and all, right? So or I mean tries to identify something like disk IO and all. So in that sense, like the time taken for the auditing, I mean the impact of auditing on the performance of the query should be very minimal. So not much, I would say.
Yeah, thank you. So another question regarding auditing is, are there any parameters to recycle or clean audit file, or is it,
Uh,
or has it to be done manually?
I think there is a parameter associated with auditing. I don't remember the name, but there is a rotation related parameter which will, rotate the audit file after a certain interval of time, right? So those parameters can be used. I have given references at the last, the EDB reference for this auditing feature. So, one can just refer to this particular URL to see like what other configuration parameters are available with auditing that can be used to recycle the audit file. So there are certain parameters which starts with the name EDB audit rotation or something. So we can make use of those parameters to recycle the audit files after certain interval of time.
Thank you,
Or, or,
Ashutosh.
or I think it can also be recycled based on the size of the audit file.
Thank you. Actually, someone call out specific slide. Maybe you want to go to slide 17.
Yeah, let me just go to that. Yes.
Yeah, okay. So this person asked why a log is made when the insert operation has not happened.
Sorry, why?
Why is a log made, log as in LOG, when the insert operation has not happened?
Insert operation has not happened, but the log message is there related to it, because the information related to this statement logging happens before the query is processed, right? So whenever whenever the query whenever the query is sent to the backend process for execution, that query is immediately written to the log file, right? And if in case anything goes wrong with that query, then the information related to the error that happens later, if that query fails due to some reason, then that information is later flushed into the log file.
Okay, thank you. Ashutosh, there's also, this is quite a long question, so I will read slowly. It's again regarding audit. This person is asking, is the auditing information stored in the backend table also? Can it be converted into the JSON structure as well, so that it can be sent to the downstream application for data replication? Is the
I'm not
auditing
sure about
information
this.
stored in the backend table?
No, it is not stored in the table. We do have the files, the log files where we store the, the audit information, as far as I know. So there is no tables associated with this that stores the query that is being executed. But yes, I mean, there are different ways of auditing the information. We can make use of triggers and all. We can create some table manually, and whichever statement that we want to audit, we can store those into the those tables. But automatically there is no tables created as such which stores this auditing information. And what was the second question? I just forgot.
Okay, so the second question is, can it be converted into the JSON structure as well, so that it can be sent to the downstream application for data replication?
I'm not much familiar with JSON and all, but I think if there is any tools and all available which can be used to convert this particular information to JSON information, then that might be possible. But otherwise, I don't know. I mean, I'm not sure about it. I can maybe try to explore about it, and give you the answer later if possible. But right now, I'm not sure.
Okay, thank you very much. I think we are really at the top of the hour, and it looks like this is all the time we have for the Q&A today. I think there's still some questions that are not answered, so not to worry, we will collect all the questions and answer as best we can via email. I just want to thank everyone for attending. We will be sharing the slide deck as well as the recording for this session. So thank you once again, and we really look forward to seeing you again in our webinar for the coming months. So thanks again and have a good day. And thank you, Ashutosh. It was a very good session. Thank you. Bye.
Thank you, Violet, and thank you everyone for attending this session. Hope
Yeah,
it was
thank
helpful
you.
for all of you.
Bye.
Thank you.
Yeah.
Thank you. Bye.
Thanks. Bye.